The perfect beach getaway ends in tragedy when three surfers are brutally murdered while on vacation in Mexico.
Well, it's a very unusual, depressing story for the victims in this case.
And with the devastating crime comes a puzzling motive.
It's almost unbelievable. Why would you murder three people for tires?
And now, key information being revealed from a star witness's testimony.
I don't really know how many really people could live with themselves in consciousness knowing someone who killed someone.
The story began in late April when three men were reported missing while on vacation in the Mexican state of Baja California. The group was made up of brothers Jake and Callum Robinson and their friend Jack Carter Rhoad. The Robinson brothers are both from Australia, but Callum moved to the States back in college when he played lacrosse at Stevenson University. While Jake Robinson was based out of Perth, Australia, both Callum and Jack Carter Rhoad were living in San Diego. Their vacation took them to Baja California for a surfing trip. It's something Callum documented from his Instagram, showing the group on the beach, listening to music, and enjoying their time off. They were last heard from on April 27th and were reported missing by their families after they failed to show up to their Airbnb.
And Mexico's a great surfing place, and it's just so sad to see that something that you do to relax and to get a break, and then someone comes and murders you.
As criminal defense attorney Mike Corbanix explains, the search for the three men ended in tragedy when they were found murdered. Each victim had been shot in the head. Their bodies were recovered from a well about 50 feet underground. Along with them, a fourth body that had already begun decomposing. Mexican authorities say the well was in a rural area that was difficult to get to. It even took first responders multiple hours to recover the bodies. Investigators say the motive, the tires on the surfer's pickup truck.
That it looks like it was a robbery that went overboard.
About 4 miles from the well, investigators found abandoned tents, some of the victims' cell phones, and a burned up pickup truck. Missing from the truck, its tires. So what we're hearing about this case is that the motive is tires on the vehicle that the three victims had. The suspect apparently just wanted the tires, and these three victims gave some pushback and wouldn't give them away. What do you make of a motive like that? Tires in exchange for three lives.
It's almost unbelievable. It'll be interesting to see what the investigation further reveals in this case. Was this someone who had a mental disorder who was the murderer? How exactly did the things happen when they were taking the tires? Was there a physical engagement that all of a sudden he brought out the gun? Was there the thing that was amazing too was not only did they steal the tires, but then they burnt the car. And you've got to wonder, you would think someone why would you murder three people for tires? Like you would think someone would have taken the car. I mean, basically left that. Well, they did trace the car down. But the very fact that the car is burned without tires, that's a strong circumstantial evidence link to who was involved and how they were involved.
We'll get back to the story of Callum, Jack, and Jake in just a moment, but first we have to give you a Law and Crime legal alert. Google Incognito tracked users' browsing data without their knowledge. Mass Tort Alliance, one of our legal sponsors, is helping users file for compensation due to Google misleading the privacy of their Incognito browser. If you've used Google Incognito anytime since 2016, you can start your claim in less than 10 questions at incognitoclaims.com/LCnews. Now back to the tragic case of the surfers murdered in Mexico. The investigation quickly pointed to one main suspect, Jesus Gerardo, and his girlfriend, Ari Geisel, has become a major witness in the case.
The real irony of this case is the fact that his girlfriend, from what I've read, is basically the major contributor and cooperator into this case, where she received many of the things that were stolen from these people and then they were murdered.
Ari told investigators her boyfriend allegedly confessed to the murders in explicit terms and gave specifics about the robbery. Days after the murders, this information was revealed in a Mexican courtroom. Mike says Ari's testimony will be extremely valuable in the case against Jesus Gerardo.
And it just appears that this person probably thought, nobody saw me, I did well, and he told his girlfriend. And I don't really know how many really people could live with themselves in consciousness, knowing someone who killed someone. I know in the criminal defense world, and like on a show like this where we talk about those kind of things happen all the time, well, they may, but in the concept of the whole world and the community, not many people have ever been in that situation. And I'm sure she was fearful of the fact that she had some of the possessions of what he stole, and she doesn't want to go do prison time for something someone else did. So I think that was a high influence on her cooperation with law enforcement.
I've also seen reports that the girlfriend's car had been fitted with these stolen tires. So her boyfriend came and was like, hey, take a look at your car. All of a sudden, it has these brand new stolen tires on them. So we've talked about that as the motive. Is that something that investigators are going to zero in on, looking at these tires, maybe taking evidence from them, tracks, things like that?
Oh, well, absolutely. I mean, they're probably going to hope they could see you. They may actually be able to get fingerprints off of this, which, somebody had to put those tires on. Did they do it with gloves or not? I mean, it's gonna have to be something that's going to have a lot of scientific evidence when there's an investigation. It's not just somebody's words. The government always wants to have some scientific proof that really is not opinionated, but it goes down to the basics of, is this really the tires from that car? And that's another link of circumstantial evidence. And when I say circumstantial evidence, I mean, it's not like, it doesn't appear like this is going to be a case where you have witnesses who said, we saw this happen. So they're going to have to use all the circumstances surrounding it to put it all together.
But the stolen tires aren't the only piece of evidence Mexican authorities recovered. So the reports I've seen say that the girlfriend had a victim's cell phone, which could be very useful with data, tracking, etc. Do you think that that will be a valuable piece of evidence?
It'll be a huge piece of evidence. It'll be a huge piece of evidence because of technology these days. The phone really tells you so many things. And the most important thing it's going to tell, in my opinion, law enforcement, is the location of where everything happened. And so at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure that the murderer in this case, if he was the same person who robbed, will show where the last incident happened once he got that phone and moved out of the area. So they're going to have a lot to be able to trace by phones. And once again, I don't think it's amazing sometimes to see where people involved in criminal activities actually text to one another and it's preserved in the phone basically forever. One of the things, though, as a defense attorney, you've got to wonder why, if these people were, whoever committed this, the boyfriend or whoever, how would you be taking phones in this day and age of someone you just murdered and not expect that that's not going to be tracked and they're going to find it? That's the real interesting thing. And it's very hurtful to the girlfriend because she was recovered with one of the victim's phones.
So far, Jesus Gerardo is the only one who's been charged in connection to the case. As of right now, I've seen the main defendant in this case has been charged with forced disappearance. What is that? Is that almost like kidnapping?
I'm not really clear on that. I don't practice in Mexico. So, but yeah, it appears that, but a lot of times what people don't realize occurs with charges is the government would always put what they at that time have the strongest evidence for. And that way they go from, so if they think we have enough for a robbery, at least we know we have a charge to then put this person in custody, keep the community safe, and then we could further our investigation to see if we could come up with strong evidence to go for the murder or things of that nature.
So you're saying it's possible that as the investigation continues, that he or maybe someone else could even face murder charges?
I would be surprised if they didn't, quite frankly. And the only reason why I'd be surprised is because his girlfriend has given these statements that are very strong and seem to put everything together. So I would be surprised if we don't see it.
Ari and another man have been detained in connection with the case, but so far Ari's only charge is possession of methamphetamine with intent to distribute. So is it possible that those two could face charges?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It would be interesting to say. It's very difficult to say now unless we had more access to the discovery and see why, in fact, she gave those statements. She may have given those statements as an agreement and cooperation, where they said, give us evidence and we won't charge you. or they could be looking at charge her and she just gave that evidence voluntarily and proceeded forward.
And again, we've talked about the location of these murders as in Baja California, and this is really one of Mexico's most violent states. The thing that first jumped into my head was possible cartel involvement. I know that we have this alleged motive right now about the tires, but is it possible that a drug cartel could have been involved in these murders?
It is possible, but it's just difficult to see from a point of view of a drug cartel if if drug movement and all that is their basis of what they're doing, why they would commit a murder and then take the tires. If they said like they committed murder and took a couple kilos out of a trunk or something like that, that would be a little more understandable. But this, we don't know all the evidence they have, but there would have to be a stronger connection to show that a drug cartel murdered 3 people and take some tires and a couple cell phones.
For now, Mike says the case is still in its early stages. What do you expect as the case moves forward? I know we're still in the early stages and a murder charge hasn't even come about yet, but what do you expect?
I expect that there would be a murder charge in this, that expectation is based upon the facts we just know now, and the very fact that they had someone who said, "I have the tires," and my boyfriend told me, I don't want to use the words he used, I got it from these initial people, and that sort with all those swear words. So it shows not only like a violence, it shows an arrogance, and that can be very, very influential in front of a jury if she testifies.
But it's possible, with 2 Australian citizens and an American, that the case is brought outside of Mexico. Is it possible that any sort of litigation could be in Australia or America, or would it all be in Mexico because that is the area of the crime?
That's an excellent question, and it was something that went through my head. There are certain things and certain statutes in the federal laws that would allow us to prosecute this case if we come to an agreement with Mexico on how the case should be handled. So that would be very interesting to see how that goes. And I think part of it would be how strong the evidence is. Who could come up with a stronger investigation, I think, is how the countries will agree upon what they're going to do.
For now, Jesus Gerardo is being held in jail in Mexico as the investigation into the murders continues. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Gillespie.